1 Billion in Financing family. My name is Cheree, the founder of 1 Billion in Financing, where we are here to help over 1,000 companies raise over $1 billion in financing for their growing enterprises. I'm so excited to have Arnold Sanow here today. He is the author of this book here. He was so gracious to give me, Get Along with Anyone, Anytime, Anywhere, 8 Keys to Creating Enduring Connections. And one of the things that Arnold helps companies with, and he's worked with a lot of companies, and I'll let him tell you a little bit more about himself, is he helps us actually build teams and get teams working together. Even for some of us, if we have current dysfunctional teams, how do we get these teams actually working together? Because we know that the number one reason investors don't put money into our business is not because we don't have a great idea, it's because we have an inadequate team. So I invited Arnold today here to actually speak with us in regards to team building and transforming groups into teams. So welcome, Arnold, to our call today.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Cheree. Good to see you again.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became an expert on this topic and actually wrote the book on it.
Well, I've been doing this for about 25 years, and I've literally worked with over about 500 different companies throughout the United States and overseas to help them build better teams and to build better communication and improve customer and workplace relationships all along. And I've been doing, I won't get into the whole story about how I was born and where I started and all that, but it's been a long time, and probably about 90% of the problems I see in any organization I go to is some kind of communication breakdown when you really boil it down to it. And quite frankly, if I could wave a magic wand and have schools put more money into it, I would actually have them put more money into the soft skills that are so important in developing teams and also profitability in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, one of the things you say is that currently everything is moving so fast. Everyone's trying to do more with less. We are all trying to grow our businesses with limited resources and sometimes limited team members. How are leaders that are really being successful actually handling the current economic environment and actually growing in the current economic times?
Well, the ones who tend to be growing know how to deal with people and know how to work with the teams they have. And when you look at really some of the key factors of growing a good team, which is really why these teams are doing so well sometimes, is it goes back to some of the reasons it motivates people. And when you look at it, you look at what the number one motivational tool is, and you've heard that term, appreciate to be appreciated. And, when you look at it, it's like when you were a young kid, you always wanted that gold ribbon or the medal or stuff like that. And as we get older, we still want those things. And in a lot of times after I do team building retreats, one of the things I find is before I do this, I talk to a lot of the people who work there, and the big thing they say is that they just don't get enough. I hear that over and over and over and over again. They appreciate. They say the bad things, but they don't say the good things. And there's sort of a rule of thumb that the best teams have is the teams that tend to do you say 5 good things for every critique. And actually the best teams are like a 6-to-1 ratio. I think that's also true in marriages too. It's like this. And if you get like to a 3-to-1 ratio, then you're not doing so hot. So it's 5 or 6-to-1, and you don't hear that much. And I do a little exercise sometimes where I have people write down 5 things that they like about another person, and I ask people later, how many of you felt uncomfortable doing that? About half the group feels uncomfortable. And when you really look at it, it's just a simple thank you. It's just showing appreciation. And a lot of times we didn't grow up with that. So when you didn't have it when you were young, you don't do it. A big excuse I hear is some people say, well, my boss doesn't do it to me. Well, why should I? Well, that's not a really good excuse either.
That's not a good answer.
It is so important. Yeah, and I find that true. So that would be like the number one thing, that managers, the teams that are doing really well, the ones that I've seen over the years, and again, I've literally done about 2,500 plus presentations, and I've also worked with the different 500 companies in coaching and consulting with them on these issues. And the ones that do the best, they show appreciation. The second thing they do is they get people to be involved on things. So what happens is people want to be part of something. They don't want to just be, you're here. They want to feel part of it. And then the third thing I find, too, is they have the ones that are best have sympathetic understanding for personal problems. So if somebody's sick or somebody needs a day off or something, they just say, okay, let's go. Let's be more flexibility, I think, is the key in these days. So those are the three aspects of the best working teams seem to have those three characteristics in common.
It's very interesting because I was reading Inc. magazine last night. It came in the mail a couple of days ago, and they were talking about the fact that the best employees these days aren't even looking for the biggest paychecks. They're looking for other types of incentives, whether it's travel or extended days off or, can I go with my child to their ballet recital at 2 p.m. or things like that. It's not even throwing money at the situation. It really is about creating environments where people can truly thrive in those environments.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake that they say, when I ask entrepreneurs what's the number one motivating factor or what motivates people, a lot of them, the first thing they say is money. Well, money is important, and let me put it this way. I mean, I may work in a job because they pay me a lot, but that doesn't mean I'm motivated. It doesn't mean I like the job. It doesn't mean I like to be there, but I'll still stick around, and I think they misinterpret that aspect of it. And when you look at employees, it usually there's a list of what motivates people, and it usually comes down maybe 5 or 6. Now, it's important, and it can be used as a motivating tool, and you might not work for it if you don't work at a place if you don't make enough. But when we talk about pure motivation and what gets people to work, it's like you're saying, it's that extra day off, it's the travel, it's the other aspects that are important. It's not just the money, and as again I say, a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs not smaller entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs.
We're small businesses. That's fine.
Small businesses. Let me use it that way. Not anyway. The small businesses that I work with, they tend to see money as the factor that motivates people. And again, if you don't do the other things like appreciation and getting people involved and giving them what they want, and the ideal situation is, and I learned this a long time ago from one of the best managers I ever had, was he sat me down and he says, we can talk about what motivates people all we want here today, but the real key is he sat me down and says, what can I do to keep you here? And which is a really good statement, because when you ask me what I can do to keep you here, it doesn't say what do you like, what you don't like. It makes me feel important, like they want me here. And so, and the person was very open and approachable and likable, and I felt I could talk to him, and it made a big difference.
Great. So let's talk first about senior team members, because when people are raising capital, one of the things that the banks and the investors do is actually look at the senior team. How do you work with senior team members, and how are you finding the relationships with senior team members in terms of creating greater cohesion amongst those people?
Well, one of the things I do, for example, I do a lot of coaching, and I won't mention names, some of the companies I work with, but I do individual coaching with people, and sometimes I'll work with people who are already very good, and then other times I get hired as a coach where I actually have a 4-month program where I'll work with people who are, let me put it, they're bullies, they're arrogant, they're not getting along, they're sexist, they're racist, they have all these qualities. But a lot of times people keep these senior level people on because they're so good at getting business. And you probably run across that. They're excellent at their job, but they're turning off everybody. So there's an incongruency here. And what happens is all the staff, you have high turnover, people want to leave all the time, there's complaining. And there's a point where sometimes the CEO of the company says, look, we just got to work with this person. So I'll work with them on an individual basis. And the first thing I'll have them do to get a team to work well is I have the senior team leader get with their team, and we go over something called guidelines and ground rules. And this is the first thing I do. And guidelines and ground rules, these are the attitudes, behaviors that we agree as a team to live and work by. And this is probably the most important thing that any team can do, because it helps you to everybody to understand what we should do, what we shouldn't do. Should we return phone calls? Should we not? Should we? We should return phone calls, but should we? Okay, that I got your email and you got my email. These little things that get in the way that irritate people and get them stressed out. So we'll go over those attitudes and behaviors and guidelines and ground rules that could be everything like disagree without being disagreeable. Some people have said speak for yourself, which means don't say, well, everybody feels that way, but I do. So I'll have the senior team member do that aspect of it. And also when I have a senior team member who's not really playing along well with all the rest of the team, and he's in trouble, and he's had some problems. I had somebody recently where I had them actually go to every person that he's offended, and I said, okay, you've got to apologize to everybody you've offended. And he looked at me and he said, well, that's going to be uncomfortable. And I said, well, I know it will be, but it's something to do. And everybody was amazed immediately afterwards, said, God, he apologized. And that's one of the biggest things. I remember the 6 most important words in the English language. I admit I made a mistake. And people hate that. If you apologize, you can get away with a lot of stuff. I mean, not get away with it, but you can actually.
Well, not continuously, but up until that point, you can have the slate cleaned is the thing. So, another thing that you teach about is this idea of benchmarks and how top companies use benchmarks in order to grow their businesses. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, what I use is I've worked with so many different companies around, from companies like Agilent Technologies to Southwest Airlines to a variety of different ones. And when I talk about benchmarks, it's just what are the best companies doing and what do we need to do to make a change in that area. So, I was talking to somebody from Agilent Technologies a while ago, and it's interesting. I said, what's your key to building excellent teams? And I said, what's your secret to success, so to speak? And he was talking about, he said that the culture creates the tension. So what happens, when I say culture, it doesn't mean people from different cultures or backgrounds or this, but all of us, we come into the teams and we have our own rule book in a sense. And our rule book is our ideas and our shoulds and our should nots, and our ego gets in the way. All these things happen. And so what happens is when we get into a group a lot of times and people see things differently than you see, I see things differently than you see it, then we get into fights, we get into disagreements, and then you see, the culture really needs to be, we need to have that ground rules and guidelines go over again to make sure we're on the right track in that area. So benchmark, in a sense, is what are some of the philosophies of some of the best companies out there, and I use that quite extensively to take a look at, okay, well, Southwest Airlines is doing that, and they're rated like one of the best places to work. You're familiar with this. The Money magazine has the top 100 best places to work in the United States. And why not just follow success? Look, what are they doing so well that everybody likes working there? And let's copy that. So, I would suggest everybody take a look at that the next time it comes out, or look it up on the net, the top 100 companies, and why are they so good? And they're doing some of the things that we talked about here today. They're showing appreciation. They're letting people be involved in things. They're rewarding people. They're doing, like you said, asking them, what can I do to keep you here? And so that's what I mean by benchmarking, following what are the best companies doing, the philosophies of those.
Right. So talk to us a little bit about communication styles. I happen to be a huge fan of The Platinum Rule by Tony Alessandro, and I'm sure you are as well. And you actually talk about building cooperation and communication styles, and I think that this is so important for every leader to know. How can we actually use communication styles in order to make our teams more cohesive?
Yeah, well, the point here is that you need to communicate the ingredients that others find is important and not just what you find is important. For example, that old saying, treat people the way you want to be treated, that's really not true. The key here is treat people the way they want to be treated, because everybody wants to be, some people, when we talk about communication styles, they want things really quickly, get to the point, give it to me right now. Whereas other times, people want to talk a little bit, they want to, converse with you. for example, I was consulting, coaching somebody one time, and I kept interrupting him because I wanted to give him his money's worth. I didn't want to, I was charging by the hour, and I said, you know what, I'm going to get you this information fast. I'm not going to charge you $1 million. And so, but
you
every
must
time
have been younger at that time.
Yeah, that's true.
You must have been. I've done that too.
You should just. I listen. I know. I was a go-getter then, just to say, let's make it so you don't have to spend a lot. So you know me well. But I was. The person went on, and I kept interrupting him. And I said, he went off on tangents all the time, and I kept interrupting him all the time. And after about an hour and a half or so, he said, Arnold, I don't think we can work together. And I was floored, because to me, I thought I was doing what? I thought I was doing a great job, getting to the bottom line, getting what he wants, saving him money. And I said, why do you say that? And he says, well, I want to talk. I want to bring out my ideas. I want to think. And you keep interrupting me. And so there was a point where we think we're doing the great job because of our communication style, and I didn't understand his style as much. Because there's styles. There's people who, want to talk a lot. And if you fail to do that, to them, that's an insult. So you've got to watch out. There's also people who are thinker-type personalities. They've got to have everything perfectly done. And a good example of this, you send them an email, and you make a mistake on the email, and you're trying to get business from them, they'll probably never hire you. Because if they say, well, they're making mistakes on this email. So if I know I got somebody like that, I'm reading everything over about 18 times, whereas if I have somebody who's wants to party all the time and is good and just talks all the time, they probably won't even read the email, first of all, so I won't even have to worry about it. But
exactly. They would do video chat like we're doing right now. So
exactly.
One of the things that I do want to say is, just because someone wants to have a conversation with you doesn't mean that conversation has to take an hour or 2 hours. If you are speaking with an employee, for example, that person may just want to let you know how their Thanksgiving was, since we just had Thanksgiving, and that conversation can take 2 to 3 minutes, but it's a way for you to connect with that person. And all of a sudden that person feels like, wow, I really enjoy you as a leader. Therefore, I'm going to do a great job for you because I had a chance to connect with you just talking about the Thanksgiving holiday. So, go ahead.
Yeah, and it is about connection. If you could take one thing, as I said, what they should probably teach in schools, which they don't, is how to engage others, how to connect with others, how to build rapport, how to build relationships with others, and quite frankly, businesses should spend half their budget. Not that I'm biased on this, but half their budget training people to do this and coaching them on that area, because when you boil it down to it, it's sort of like. What's that show, So You Think You Can, I don't know if you've seen So You Think You Can Dance. There's a television show out there, and the judge in it says it's not necessarily the best dancers who win, it's the ones they like the most.
Yeah.
And think about that. Who would you rather work with? Who would you rather deal with? I know people in the speaking business, and I have some speakers bureaus I work with, and they tell me, these people who are excellent speakers, they're dynamic, they're great on the stage, and they said they'll never work with them again because... It's not that they're not great. It's because they're just a pain in the neck to deal with. And I'm sure you've had people you want to work with, and you know what? They do a great job, but is it worth the hassle?
Yeah,
I don't know if you ever had that feeling. But,
So I know that the best leaders that I've had, this is just personally, and maybe it's because I'm a director, I like leaders that have great vision. They tell me what the entire vision of the company is. They tell me what my part is and how that part is helping the entire vision to be actually, put into fruition. And then they leave me alone to let me do my part, They say, okay, Cheree, this is your goal. This is when it's due. And they go off and they do something else.
And leave you alone.
Exactly. Versus other people who have tried to micromanage me. I don't like to be micromanaged. There are other people who do like to be micromanaged. They like to know step by step that they're doing it correctly. So we as leaders have to be chameleons, I think is what you're saying. We have to communicate with them in the way that they need to be communicated so that we get what we want at the end of the day. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And when you have that first meeting with your staff, one of the things to do, remember we talked about guidelines and ground rules, the attitudes, the behaviors, the beliefs that we want our team to live and work by. I would suggest that you actually, as the leader, if you're the leader there, you tell everybody what your style is and you let people know how you want to be you make it very clear. The trouble is there's too little communication going on, and everybody assumes everything, or they go from that misnomer that, okay, treat people the way you want to be treated, which is really not the right way to do this. But if you're the leader, why aren't we just sitting there saying, okay, let me give you my style first and how I like things done. And you know what? That clears the air right there. You don't take it personally when somebody doesn't say, sends an email back to you directly without putting a hi in there, and please and thank you and stuff, which some people go crazy when they say, well, he never puts hi in there. Well, that's his style, so don't do it. And I would say the biggest way to keep your stress down in this area with different styles is don't take it personally. I have that on my wall. Don't take it personally, because there's going to be a lot of people out there who irritate you, and it's not against you. It's just the way that they were raised, their background, their beliefs.
Right. There are some people who just do their job really well. They're not, and sometimes people are just having an off day, and you can't take it personally. It has nothing to do with you. It's just that they're having an off day. So
yeah, and you got to watch. And you got to watch out, because when you're for example, let's say you're walking down the hall in the morning, and your boss, you say hello to your boss, and they don't say hello. Mm-hmm. Well, what are you thinking if you're an employee for the next 3 weeks? You're thinking, they don't like me, they don't trust me. All these things go through your head, and it's nothing against the boss. I mean, she may just be like her mind's on something else. But what do people take it at? And as a leader, what you've really got to do is you've got to pay attention and be in the moment on all these types of things. You got to be, thinking about this stuff, because people's perceptions. The old saying, "Perception is reality," which is not really true. Perception is not reality. Perception is your reality about the way things are. But if I walk down the hall and you don't say hi to me, and you're my boss, I'm thinking, oh, what did I do wrong? They don't like me, and all these things start coming out. And I hear this when I interview people before I do these team building workshops and retreats.
Yeah. So let's talk about the word no and saying no to people, and how we as leaders can actually say no, but still, create effective teams, and teams that aren't going to be upset with us, or, well, not necessarily we care about being upset, but we still want them to achieve a certain goal, even though we have to say no. Talk to us about that.
Well, when I say no, it's how you say it. There's an old saying, it's not what you say, it's how you say it that really makes a difference. And a lot of times, you want to say something, and this is where a lot of leaders have problems telling somebody something, because they're afraid of how it's going to come out. And it comes out the wrong way, and then everybody hates you, nobody's talking to each other and all that. So there's a technique called the USA technique for saying no. And let's say, Cheree, you're interrupting me at work. Okay, and I could say, okay, could you get out of here right now? I'm busy. I could give you that look, and that's fine. That'll work, but you may not come back to visit me. You may not come see me again. So in this sense, I might say, Cheree, I understand this is the you. I understand this is important to you, and by doing that, I'm showing empathy to you. You're important to me. Mm-hmm. However, Cheree, here's the situation. I've got this report that's got to be out in 25 minutes, giving a number here. And what I'm doing here is I'm giving a reason. And by the way, leaders and managers who give reasons get a lot more compliance than managers who do not give reasons. So, just to say, hey, get away, give a reason. So I understand this is important to you. However, here's the situation. I've got this report that's due out in 30 minutes. And why don't we do this as the action, or it's called action or alternative. Why don't we meet tomorrow at 4:15? Why don't you get lost? No, don't say get lost, but why don't you do something? Why don't you, we'll meet at tomorrow at 4:15. So you give them some alternative or some action to do it. So it's a much nicer way of saying something to somebody. And you can use this in a lot of instances. A meeting goes too long. You can say, I understand you want to talk about this right now, but the situation we've got to finish by 12 o'clock. Why don't we do this? I'll talk to you after the meeting to get that done. So there's a lot of different techniques you can use in that aspect of it. But try I recommend people try that USA technique to actually learn what to do to say no in a nice way.
So one of the other things that you teach about is having effective meetings. And since you opened up Pandora's box, I'm going to ask you about that. How do we as leaders have effective meetings? Because again, we are raising capital because let's say we want to triple our business or we want to expand into new markets and we're bringing that new capital in. We need to have all of our team members on board and understanding what we're trying to achieve as a team. And we do that through having meetings and getting people on board. So tell us a little bit about how we actually have effective team meetings.
Well, when you talk about effective team meetings, first of all, I would start with the guidelines and ground rules just to make sure we're all on the point right there. But there's a few things I would look at. First of all, I would say who needs to be in each meeting. Who is, a lot of times we have meetings and people wonder why they're in there or they're not in there. And actually, if you don't go to meetings, people get upset when they don't get to go sometimes. So we need to have those. I would say, too, it's got to be a little more interesting than some of those things. You ever seen that commercial where I forget who it was for, but the guy says, okay, let's just turn out the lights to show the slides, and everybody takes off to go to a fast food place or something, and then when he turns the lights on, they all come back. And so meetings can be pretty boring, too. So I would keep it moving along on that point. I would also have a timeline for the meetings, and what I do in some of the meetings that I've had with some of the companies I work with, anybody can say, get to it. Anybody in the room can say, get to it. There's a term which means, okay, we're going off on a tangent, and anybody in there can yell, get to it. So it just means let's get moving on this point. A lot of times we have people also have these stand timers. I don't know if you've seen the stand timers. Where it's, and when that's over, it's over. Some companies I've worked with, we've had it where nobody can have a meeting over 1 hour. And what we mean by 1 hour is, and people say, boy, how are we going to get our ideas across? How are we going to? And then after a while, they found that they were really getting to the point because it would just end, and we made sure it ended at 1 hour no matter what. And a lot of them were shorter, but that was the longest. Other things to keep things as stand-up meetings. I like those types of things.
I've heard of those.
Nobody goes off on tangents because they just don't want to keep standing there all the time. So no sitting down meetings at that point would be just a few of the things I would recommend for that aspect of it. Yeah.
One of the things that I read was to have, at the very beginning say, this is the goal of the meeting. And when we reach our goal, then, then the meeting's over, but having a meeting where there is no goal or where no one knows why they're there, or at the end of the meeting where nothing's resolved, to me seems kind of useless as well. And the second thing that I always believed with meetings is, having takeaways. Who's doing what? Who's writing the minutes of the meeting down? And the minutes don't have to be official. It could just be notes, but where somebody says, oh, okay, I volunteer to do this, you have that person who's kind of recording the meeting to make sure that and able to follow up saying, well, this is what you promised during the meeting, so that, again, your organization moves forward.
Exactly. Yeah, and you definitely need that follow-up. So there has to be somebody responsible for doing that. Who's going to do it? When's it going to get done? What are the resources required to make it happen? These are all factors that need to be planned out in advance. And a lot of time that's good by sending the agenda out in advance. And sometimes even getting some of these things decided in advance before you even have the meeting, and then the meeting goes a lot quicker, too. Also, when you talk about getting business, one of the things you got to realize, too, is when you're meeting with people who are going to fund you or meeting with people, for example, I work with a lot of companies to help them win oral proposals. And what that is they're trying to win contracts from either government or private enterprise. And the thing is, the meeting is set up, and we spend hours and days going over the person's presentation skills, and not just their presentation skills, but the rapport. We even plan how you walk in the room. What do you wear that day? I had one defense contract the other day who's we had about 8 people, and 3 of them I said, you're going to have to do a dress rehearsal, and they all complained to me, and they had to buy 3 of them suits because they were trying to get a.
Were they going to decide the day of what they were going to wear?
They were, they did, and as soon as the dress rehearsal was over, they threw off their suits and ties and said, "I'm not doing this anymore." So, but anyway, we worked on that, and we go into how the meeting is going to come across. How do you build that rapport? How do you connect? Also, who's going to be talking to the person at the meeting? So, for example, this goes back to styles. If I get along with Cheree and I have the same style, I should be the one talking to Cheree. Or if I don't, you're a different style. Maybe we have Jim or Mary or Sue talk to you. Who's going to be the one to do that? And the other thing I'd watch out is be in the moment again, because I just had a situation, and I can't mention the name of the client, but we lost a big multi-million dollar contract because their presentations were down pat. But the person who was speaking, and if you've ever gone into one of these things, you have like all the experts sitting behind you, and you have one person as the project manager overseeing it, and they start talking. And while we were talking, there's 6 people back here, they're all experts. 2 of them were texting while the meeting was going on. And I can't believe, but anyway, 2 of them were texting. And the person we found out, why did we lose this? Because they had the right price, they had the right product. These experts were experts. I mean, there was nothing wrong with them, type of thing. But the people later on said the reason we didn't hire you was because you just didn't look like you were interested. The guy said, what do you mean? He said, your guys sitting back there were texting. So even if you're not speaking at a meeting, guess what? People are always observing you. So it's like when you're at a meeting, let's say you're on a panel or you're at a meeting somewhere, look like you're involved. Look like you're excited. You should be, if your team member's up there speaking, you should be at the edge of your seat like, wow, that is cool. It's like when I used to do a lot of showcases for speakers. We'd have all the other speakers in there and said, okay, who's ever speaking, when they finish, everybody get up and scream and yell and all this stuff. So I don't care how good they are, you just yell and scream. And we're your cheerleaders. And that's the same thing. If you're trying to get business, you need to be a cheerleader for the team. So even if you're not the one speaking, guess what? I'm observing. I'm watching you when you're sitting there. Do you look bored? Do you look enticed? Because you know what the person's thinking about? If they're going to hire in your team, they're thinking, do I want to work with that team? Because I'm sitting there, do I want to work with these guys for the next 5 years? Because sometimes these contracts get longer. And, and a lot of it gets down to, you probably heard that old saying, what's the old saying? People deal with people they like and they trust. We know that. But the other part is even if people deal with people they like and they trust, everything being equal, people deal with people they like and they trust. But everything being unequal, they still deal with people they like and they trust. And unequal could be, for example, how many times have you gone to somebody else who had a service? Somebody had a service, they came to you and they had the best price, best product, everything was great, but there was just something you didn't like about them. It's like going to buy a car. The guy had the perfect price, everything else, but you just didn't like the salesperson. Something gets in the way. And I've walked out of stores because of, I wanted to buy something, but the person turned me off. So, and I was ready to buy. I was an easy sale, and they put their foot in their mouth or something. So you just got to really watch that.
Yeah. Well, you definitely brought up a point that I didn't even think of, which is texting while other people are speaking. Just because it's not your turn up, the whole team has to be cohesive at all points. Even if you are going to the lunchroom or something like that, somebody is looking at you.
Exactly.
To make sure that you're the type of person that they want to work with. So, for a final question, let's just talk about building a team. How does a leader build an effective team? If we're talking about growing a company from, let's say, $1 million to $20 million or something like that, how do we actually attract great team members and actually help, build a team?
Well, to attract good team members, like some of the things I do, first of all, too, is I like to, a lot of the companies I work with that have done real well, they actually ask some of the people who are currently on the team or currently they're working with, who do they know? Because a lot of times that's a much better insight sometimes than just trying to find somebody on the internet or online, or because you don't really know what you're dealing with at that point. The other thing, too, is you really got to look at the culture, too, is what are the types of people? And this gets back into styles. And, what are the styles of the people there? Can they connect? Can they work together? Because I see a lot of dysfunction with some of these groups that are, it's a gold mine for me as far as working, but with a lot of the teams that are just dysfunctional, I shouldn't say this, but a lot of the teams that are dysfunctional, I get hired to come in and try to fix it. But it's a lot of it's became because of the culture. They didn't hire the right people at the right time. They never checked out things in advance. Sometimes people can snow you because everybody learns the right answers to interview questions. I mean, we can go over and everybody will have the same answer. So it's that. But what do they do? And so I would also interview very carefully the people I'm dealing with and ask them give them role play type things. What would you do in this situation? What would you do in this situation? Really try to find out if they're the right types of person for your team and where you want to go with it. The other thing I would really highlight again is once you get the people on your team, is really have those meetings with the guidelines and ground rules. And you can do it yourself or you can have a facilitator do it. But what are the behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs that we agree to live and work by? And this is eye-opening. And we write them down. We all discuss it. And as a leader, you can't just say, here's what they're going to be. You have to have input. You've got to let other people. You almost got to be quiet and shut up, which is hard to do for sometimes a lot of managers and leaders. But let the team come up with the answers and discuss what you can do that. And then I really put it down to is there's three keys that are keys to relationships to build with your team. And the three things that all leaders and managers got to have. They've got to have the trust of the team. I mean, I get a lot of people, every time I mention that word, I hear there's a lot of distrust with a lot of people working together in some cases. And so we look at the trust aspect of it, and because the first thing people are thinking about is, can I trust you when they meet with you? And so it's everything you say, it's everything you do, it's your body language, your tone, everything that comes across. The second thing is people are wondering when you talk about the three keys to relationships, do you care about me? And when I talk about do you care about me, if you don't care about me, I don't care about you. Right. And how do you show you care? And by the way, what I would recommend is I'm a big proponent of team meetings. And when you have a team meeting like this is, okay, what does trust look like? I have the team bring up what trust is. Show me what does caring look like? And then the third thing is doing excellent work. And so what I mean by that is people like leaders who really know what they're doing, who are competent and know exactly what they're doing. So it's the trust, it's do you care about me, and do you do excellent work? So those are the three things to build the team to make you as a leader come out as an effective leader to build an excellent team.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting you talk about trust, because I just had a situation where I'm actually pitching a TV show to a network, which is a different topic, but we were interested in a specific director, and we sent the contract to him, and he said to me 3 times, I'm sending the contract, I'm sending the contract, I'm sending the contract, and we still don't have the contract from him. So I was saying to somebody, the person that introduced me to him, if I can't trust him to send me the contract, how am I going to trust him in business itself? And of course I got from the other team member, but he's just, all of these excuses. I think a lot of times as leaders, we don't look at the warning signs. Somebody's clearly telling us that they aren't going to, the simple thing of, if I say I'm going to contact you on Tuesday, do I actually contact you on Tuesday? If I don't, then there's a problem. And a lot of times,
it's that responsiveness. Yeah.
It is. And a lot of times as leaders, we don't actually look at what someone does before they even come into our organization. And then, it's 5 years later and we're trying to figure out what happened to our team. So,
exactly.
Any final words that you have in terms of team building and team relationships and how we as leaders can build better teams?
Well, to sum this up a little bit, too, I would say, first of all, as a leader, everybody needs to look at their own rule book. And what I mean by that, they need to look at their shoulds, their should nots. Is their ego getting in the way of effective relationships? So would be one thing. So you have to take a good look at yourself and be open to that type of thing, too. Second of all, just to summarize this again, I would do the guidelines and ground rules aspect of it, which we've talked, and other things. And then the third thing is there's an old saying that Stephen Covey used to use, like understand others first before having them understand you. You know, in other words, communicate the ingredients that others find is important and not just what you find is important, to have those effective teams and have those effective relationships that go with that. And then finally, I would say it all depends on attitude. And, you know, everything begins and ends with your attitude and you know, the positive, upbeat. People want to, you know, actually work with people who are in good spirits all the time. They don't want the Debbie Downers on Saturday Night Live or whatever to be around. They like those people in good spirits. So if you can take some of those suggestions and put them into your company and your organization, you know, you'll at least be a step ahead of everybody else.
Fantastic. Now, this is your book again. Get Along with Anyone, Anytime, Anywhere. How can people actually purchase this book?
Well, the best deal is on Amazon.com. So I would just go to Amazon.com and go into Get Along with Anyone, Anytime, Anywhere. And they always have better prices than anybody else. So if you want to get a good deal on it, that's the place to go. And it is in some bookstores, too, so you could go there. But, you know, these days I would just probably go to Amazon and get it, be the best one to look at.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being part of the faculty of 1 Billion in Financing. And I know that people learned a lot today about building effective teams and being great leaders. So thank you so much, Arnold.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay.